Yesterday, someone asked me if I'm trying to convince teachers not to quit teaching. I'm a researcher. My job is to explore and to share what I've learned. So I'm never trying to convince anyone of anything. But I did recently have a former grad student call me up to tell me she was thinking about quitting teaching. She wanted some advice. I didn't give her advice, but I did ask her some questions. And I'd like to share those questions with you in case you're struggling to make that same big decision.
If you're new to me or new to this channel, I'm Julie Hassan, a professor, researcher, and teacher advocate. I've spent the past 5 years talking to people about teachers they remember, trying to understand what teachers say or do to leave a lasting impact on students' lives. I know really well how important teaching is and how much teachers matter to kids, to families, to the world. But I also hear you when you talk about how difficult teaching has become. And I know many of you are thinking about quitting. I had a student call me, a former grad student last week, and she was thinking about whether or not to leave teaching and asked for some advice. And when I listened to her describe what she was going through, she said it's not just that teaching's gotten harder. It's always been hard. It's that it's become the wrong kind of hard. And I've heard that from so many of you. She asked for my advice. I resist giving advice. It's all I can do sometimes to manage my own decisions. But I will ask questions. And so I asked her some questions, and I think these questions may help you think through your decision if you're thinking about whether to stay or go. The first question I asked her is, why did you start teaching in the first place? What drew you to this profession? Are those reasons still important to you? Are there other paths that might help you fulfill that same sense of purpose? I think it's important to reflect on why we started when we're at a point where we feel like leaving it behind. So I started there, but then I asked her, why are you thinking of quitting? What are the challenges that are really making it hard for you to continue? And are those challenges likely to change? So is this a temporary thing? We're just coming out of a pandemic. There's a lot of political stuff going on. Kids are just adjusting in many places to getting back to in-person learning. So are the challenges that you're struggling with temporary challenges, or do they feel like they're going to stick around and may be hard to overcome? Was, what have you already tried? Because I know thinking about quitting isn't the first place we go. A lot of things have happened, and we've tried a lot of things before we get to that point. So she talked about some of the things that she had tried, and then we talked about some of the additional things she might try. Is it possible that finding ways to get more sleep, to get more exercise, to connect with other teachers and share concerns, to start a spiritual practice, to work with her principal on maybe taking some things off her plate? Were there additional things she could do that might help? So we talked through some of those, and the last question I asked her was probably the most important. What are the costs of staying, and what are the costs of leaving? There were costs either way. She talks about the cost of leaving, giving up that powerful connection she felt with students, giving up that satisfaction in those light bulb moments, and watching a student transform, and all of the joy she carries from watching them when they leave her classroom, move on through other grades. Some of them have graduated and moved on into busy, productive, amazing lives. And she felt the weight of losing that. But there were costs to staying. She's a mom, and she felt like she wasn't able to be fully present for her kids because the pressures for her job were so great. She was experiencing some health concerns from her job. And so we really talked through the cost of leaving the cost of staying. And I shared with her, and I know she knew, that I left a principal job in 2015 to go into higher education, to become a professor. I felt like I could make a bigger impact, that I would have the time to do the research and the writing that I wanted to do, that I would have the opportunity to help develop some principals who could go out into schools and take good care of teachers and students. But I also had to admit to her that that principal job was often overwhelming. And I knew that I couldn't do these other impactful things I wanted to do if I stayed in that role. Because drowning people can't save other drowning people. And I had to get out of the pool so that I could help my friends who were still there, so that I could offer them things that I learned in my research, so that I could encourage them and support them in ways I couldn't when I was in there with them. And so I ask those of you, if you decide to go, please reach back and help the ones who chose to stay. There are so many ways to do that. Some of them are just simple ways that are integrated into our everyday life. When you hear people continuing this unhelpful narrative about teachers in schools, call it out. Share a more positive narrative, because you know what it's like to do that work. Write letters to your legislators, and your policymakers. Let them know when the decisions they're making aren't good for teachers. Support your local schools. Volunteer if you can. Help them with supplies they need if you can. Or better yet, run for school board. Goodness knows we could use more sane people in our school board. So I know what you're wondering, did my student decide to stay or go? She hasn't yet. It's a tough decision, and it's really taking her some time. But she said something that felt really heavy to me. She said, I don't want you to be disappointed in me. Whew. Sorry, guys. And the truth is, the people who love you will support you no matter what. This is a really personal decision. This is a hard decision. And those of you who know me know I'm the mom of a teacher. I would hate to think that she would stay when it was no longer right for her because she was afraid I would be disappointed. She's a multi-talented, multi-passionate kid, really gifted photographer, has a lot of interest. She may someday decide that that's a better path for her. That's okay. Whether you choose to teach for 3 years or 30 years, thank you. Thank you for the sacrifices you've made for this difficult work that makes such a difference in the world. I wish you all the best in making some of these difficult decisions. I hope these questions were helpful, and I hope you know how very, very much your teaching mattered, how very much you matter.